Good evening and welcome to Sukkah In Place. My name is Jenna Weiss and I'm the Manager of Public Programs at the Jewish Museum. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this event, and I hope you'll continue to join the Jewish Museum virtually over the coming months as we program for our newly opened exhibition, We Fight to Build a Free World, an exhibition by Jonathan Horowitz, among other art classes, art making workshops, and programs available online. For more information, please visit our website to sign up for our e-news. Now I would like to share how tonight's program will run. Sukkah In Place is a project created by Danielle Durchslag and Frank through their two-person artist collective, Assembly Required. Since 2013, they have been reconfiguring and reimagining the Jewish ritual of Sukkot. With the idea of redefining the human body as this year's Sukkah, they have commissioned works by movement artists Hadar Ahuvia, Verónica Santiago Moniello, Londs Reuter, and Nehemoyia Young. The projects are captured in a 20-minute film, which we will screen in a moment. After the film, we will be joined by two of the choreographers, Hadar Ahuvia and Nehemoyia Young, along with Rabbi Matt Green for a conversation and questions from the audience. During the program, we encourage you to use the Q&A function on Zoom to ask questions of our speakers. I want to take this moment to thank all of the artists involved in this project and Congregation Beth Elohim for co-presenting this program with the Jewish Museum. Now I'd like to welcome Danielle Durchslag and Frank to start the film.
Hello.
Welcome.
We are the artist collective Assembly Required.
I am Danielle.
And I'm Ryan.
As artists, we believe ancient ritual, when reconfigured and reimagined, can powerfully address contemporary challenges.
We focus our practice on the festival of Sukkot, a week-long holiday when Jews build and spend time in ritual huts to remind them of the dwellings ancient Jews lived in during a time of major tumult, wandering the desert. With its partially open roof and strong walls, sukkahs have always been about both exposure to the elements and protection from them. It's a holiday rooted in the idea of finding strength in vulnerability.
This year, the challenge of the global pandemic felt like a ripe opportunity for us, as artists, to re-engage with this holiday.
Today we're going to walk you through how we employ ancient ritual as a springboard to create dynamic, contemporary, expansive experiences to address current problems.
Most of this talk will be about our current project, Sukkah In Place, our creative response to the pandemic. But we want to begin by introducing you to our previous project, A Wandering Sukkah, our response to the problems facing New Yorkers 5 years ago.
We always start a project with the version of this question: what is currently needed, and how can a sukkah meet that need?
In 2015, we decided that New Yorkers, stuck in the relentless forward momentum and heightened pace of city life, at a time when privacy felt like a rare and privileged commodity, required a space for solitude and reflection.
At a time when buildings in New York were expanding at an exponential rate, we decided our sukkah's design would be inspired by skyscraper architecture.
In order to reach as many people as possible, we designed our single-serving sukkah to fit on the back of a pickup truck.
You want to come try it out? Come on! Have you ever seen a sukkah before? No. Do you know what a sukkah is? I can tell you. Have you been inside yet? No. Oh, you gotta check out the sukkah. Yes, it's one at a time. Take a moment. It's called a wandering sukkah because after today, we're going to be driving it and parking it all over the 5 boroughs. It's a single occupancy fine art sukkah. You want to give it a shot?
Well, I see what.
Oh, it's different on the inside. You should give it a shot.
Wait, you got like a woman in there for me?
No, we do not.
We created a colorful, inviting structure on the outside that welcomed visitors to look upward and enjoy the sky inside, a view New Yorkers rarely had the time or inclination to take in.
We purposefully had a host for each Sukkah stop, ranging from the secular to the religious and everything in between.
Sukkahs traditionally are by and for Jews, but a lot of people don't realize that welcoming the stranger, an act known as Ushpizin, is actually a central theme of Sukkot.
All New Yorkers would normally see Sukkahs during Sukkot, but very few stepped inside. We sought to change that. Whenever we embark on a project, we do a lot of research. We read ancient texts and investigate contemporary interpretations of all aspects of Sukkot.
For a wandering Sukkah, that research led us to this quote.
I am but dust and ashes. The world was made for me. We wanted language inside the sukkah that presented it as both a humbling and empowering space, a portal between everyday life and the sacred, a moment of solace from the chaos of New York City.
5 years ago, we addressed the needs of all New Yorkers. Today, in this very specific moment, we decided to expand our vision to create a project for all people. The pandemic is a shared and unfortunate global experience. All of us, to some degree, are laboring under similar constraints.
So we began with this question: what does everybody need right now that a sukkah can provide? But pretty quickly, instead, we landed on this: what does every body need right now during the pandemic that a sukkah could help with?
The pandemic and Sukkot have a lot in common. They are experiences that are uncomfortable, vulnerable, and impermanent.
This fall, most people, Jewish and otherwise, will not be able to gather collectively for the holiday as they normally would, to share meals, recite prayers, and enjoy each other's company, as they have for centuries past.
So this year, we decided to focus on the human body as 2020 Sukkah, our most immediate, impermanent shelters which contain us. Like a Sukkah, our bodies are temporary vessels exposed to the elements. They are our most intimate spiritual and physical dwellings.
And right now, in this time of extreme physical stress and uncertainty, all of us, in myriad ways, are seeking a feeling of shelter in our bodies, just like ancient Jews wandering the desert sought shelter in sukkahs.
And bodies, it turns out, are a central component of Sukkot, because we use them every year to engage in a very specific physical ritual during the holiday, a kind of sacred plant dance.
There are 4 species of plant life that we utilize during this dance. They are the etrog, the date palm, myrtle, and willow.
These materials are honored for their beauty, symbolism, and purpose. Especially the etrog, a rare and precious lemon-like citrus that observant Jews go to great lengths to procure in order to practice this ritual.
The date palm, myrtle, and willow are bound together in a special woven casing. Collectively, these 3 species make up the lulav.
As with everything in Jewish life, there are various interpretations of why the lulav consists of these items bound together. In order to find the most resonant reading for 2020, we turned to our favorite contemporary source of Jewish wisdom:
YouTube. And there we found our favorite rabbinical scholar of all things lulav and etrog, Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
We want to bring ourselves together. If we're falling apart, we want to hold it all together.
The idea of Sukkot as a way to embrace strength in adversity, confidence in vulnerability, has always existed,
but it feels particularly appropriate during the pandemic.
Now we'll let Rabbi Finkelstein demonstrate this ancient Sukkot plant dance that is still practiced today.
And now I shake lulav. Are you ready? We shake lulav, we go in all directions. We shake 3 times, once, twice, 3 times. And as we go forward and back, we're able to shake the lulav a bit. Then we go to the right, once, twice, 3 times. As we go each time, we shake. Go in the back, once, twice, 3 times. Go left, once, twice, 3 times. And then we go up, once, twice, 3 times. And we go down, once, twice, and 3 times. Toward the chest and away from the chest. That's how we shake the lulav.
What do these 4 species symbolize? As with everything in Jewish life, there is a range of opinion. One strain of thought argues that the 4 species represent 4 different kinds of Jews.
We bring together different types of Jews, those who have better smell and less smell, those who have more good looks and not so good looks, those who taste good and those who don't.
Another traditional interpretation understands the 4 species as stand-ins for parts of the human body. The etrog, the lemon look-alike, represents the human heart. The myrtle, because the leaves are small and oval-shaped, represents the eyes. The long and thin willow leaves represent the mouth, and the straight, elongated palm represents the human spine.
That explanation of the 4 species as rooted in the body really resonated with us, especially during this pandemic, a time of seismic focus on our physical selves.
But what about the shaking? Why not just point the species? Why shake them?
We asked some rabbis this question, and they didn't totally know. There isn't a definitive answer as to why observant Jews shake the 4 species.
So we decided to turn to people we consider the rabbis of the body, professionals deeply rooted in the body's relationship to movement, ritual, and meaning.
We're talking about choreographers.
Sacred movement as a part of religious ritual is as old as faith. In Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and countless other religions, physical movement is a critical component of prayer.
We don't often think about these movements as dance, or even question their origin. But in the year of COVID-19, we wanted to explore the potential of this shaking ritual.
The body can contain nonverbal wisdom, a physicalized knowing that we wanted to tap into for Sukkah In Place.
In order to better investigate this shaking ritual for the particular challenges of this moment, we invited 4 movement-based artists from different racial, religious, and dance backgrounds to produce work for Sukkah In Place.
Those movement artists are Hadar Ahuvia, Nehemoyia Young,
Londs Reuter, Verónica Santiago Moniello.
Our invitations were guided, like all our creative decisions, by the theme of welcoming the stranger.
We wanted to approach artists whose work would be new to us and who have a range of relationships to Judaism and Sukkot.
Everything from a choreographer deeply rooted in Jewishness to movement artists who had never encountered the holiday before, inviting them to be artistic authorities in traditional Jewish space. The only parameters for their contributions were that they focus on one of the 4 body parts represented by the 4 species and create 1 minute or less of filmic movement responses to the lulav and etrog ritual.
We gave them all the same video footage of observant Jews shaking the lulav and etrog. We did not offer any other guidelines. It was important for us that each of them was able to respond thoughtfully and authentically, guided by their own movement practice.
We are now so excited and grateful to get to share the responses to that prompt from these 4 remarkable artists.
we want to thank these marvelous artists for creating such thoughtful and powerful work.
Obviously, what you just saw was not traditional or kosher for Sukkot. But this is not a traditional time. This is a time that demands new approaches to the way we live our lives.
So with that in mind, this week, this Sukkot, we want to remind you that your body is a sukkah. It is your sacred container, your portal of exposure to the world, and your protection from it.
In the coming 7 days, all of us will have the same conversations we've been cycling through for months about fear and illness, our current and future lives, the challenges and singularity of this moment.
But during the next 7 days, we encourage you to focus less on those conversations. Instead, hone in on the shelter you're walking around in, your own physical body.
Ask yourself how it feels, what it needs, where it guides you. Does it keep you together, even in times this dangerous and uncertain?
Check in with your physical self this holiday, just like our movement artists did, and see what you discover about your most intimate shelter.
That is our offering and our challenge to you.
Chag Sameach.
Great, welcome back. And I'm going to introduce briefly tonight's panelists so we can get started with our conversation. Danielle Durchslag is an artist and filmmaker based in Brooklyn, New York. Alongside her work with Assembly Required, she makes art about the political and psychological complexities of American Jewish wealth. Recently, her short film, Eleanor of Illinois, received a grant from the inaugural cycle of the NYFA Made in New York Women's Film, TV, and Theater Fund and premiered at the New York Jewish Film Festival. Durchslag was a selected fellow for the 2019-2020 cycle of the New Jewish Culture Fellowship. Ryan Frank is a New York-based artist and curator, a native of California, and a graduate of New York University. He has had solo exhibitions at the Invisible Dog Art Center, the Mattatuck Museum, and the Children's Museum of the Arts, and has attended residencies at Lana Poole Art Foundation, Gentile Foundation, and the Wasaic Project, and curated exhibitions at Winkleman Gallery and Artspace New Haven, among other venues. Hadar Ahuvia creates dance, text, and song for a radical diasporism. She has received past support for her work from the Movement Research, the 14th Street Y, Baryshnikov Art Center, Yaddo, Dance Space Project, and Gibney. She was a 2018 Bessie nominee for Outstanding Breakout Choreographer and named a Dance Magazine's 25 to Watch in 2019. Nehemoyia Young is a 2019 graduate of Union Theological Seminary, where she received a master's in theology, performance art, and ritual. She is the founder of Spirit List, a digital platform focused on Indigenous healing and wellness, as well as the co-founder of In Liberated Company, a social dance community committed to addressing religious trauma among ex-fundamentalists. Young has worked alongside Okwe Opokwasili, Andre Zachary, David Thompson, and Maria Bauman, among others. And finally, Matt Green is Assistant Rabbi of Congregation Beth Elohim. He was ordained by the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York, where he was a Tisch Fellow. Green serves as the director of Brooklyn Jews Fellowship, a community of young Brooklynites looking for connection to Jewish culture, time, and ritual. Now let's get started. A reminder to please use the Q&A function on Zoom to ask questions of our speakers as we go throughout the conversation. And I'm just going to turn this over to Danielle and Ryan to ask how you guys got started collaborating on these projects together.
It was a long time ago now. We've been working together since 2013. We've been friends for 15 years and met in an art class when we were very young. But I would say, we started these projects because in 2013, I really had at the time a kind of faith-based Jewish community and a very much arts-oriented community, and there wasn't a lot of overlap. So I sort of approached Ryan. We'd already been making together and curating together and all kinds of creative endeavors, and said to him, like, what about a sukkah as a place to really as a place where those communities could really meet and combine?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. By chance, a year before, I was in Israel for the first time during Sukkot, and so had eaten in a sukkah and experienced this holiday firsthand. And I was less interested in it as a sort of religious ritual space, but really kind of as a physical space. And I thought it was really interesting, and that was sort of came out of a curiosity of my own art practice. And it sort of, when Danielle approached me, it was the kind of project that started very small and expanded that in that first iteration. And here we are 7 years later.
Yeah, and I had to say, part of what's so interesting about us working together is, as you saw in the video, I'm Jewish and Ryan is not, right? And so part of what Ryan, I'm so grateful for, and what he brings into the partnership is this real vision of building a sukkah as a really radical kind of divinely mandated art project, which isn't the way I thought about it as a kid, having Sukkot every year, but it's absolutely true, and is part of what Ryan really brings to our discussions and our creative juice together. And that's why, we keep making these things.
Yeah, and I think it is because we have such different experiences with religion and with this ritual that it keeps on sort of having such interest for us.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to come in? Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you, and I also want to say, after having seen that now amongst this crew of people, but also even before, I'm just so in awe of your work, and so thank you. I'm also reminded in watching your piece that in the Mishnah, there's a whole conversation about how a sukkah has to be man-made or has to come from the body. It can't just be naturally occurring. And in a lengthy discussion about that, one of the rabbinic commentaries is that one of the walls, or some of the walls of a sukkah, can actually be a human body. And they say all kinds of weird stuff. They say an elephant could count as a wall of the sukkah, so do with that what you will. I haven't seen such a sukkah, but it is there in our ancient text. And so I guess I'm wondering for you all, like, what it means to you perhaps personally this year to consider what it means to exist in a sukkah in your body.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Danielle and I started talking about this project in March, just as
I think the world shut down.
Yeah, as our lives were changing very rapidly. And I think immediately, one of the things we realized is that there were a lot of similarities to the challenges of the pandemic and a sukkah, and that there are these temporary periods of time that are slightly uncomfortable, vulnerable, impermanent, constricting. So, and that sort of was the start of it, start of our dialogue, and looking at sort of how, the holiday really spoke to this moment that we were in.
That's right, but I'll say for myself personally, and I think this drove a lot of our discussions too, is, I'll speak for myself, but I think it's true for a lot of people right now. This is a terrifying time to be in our bodies. It's scary. I have self-diagnosed with COVID a dozen times in these months. I think a lot of us have, right? Because we are so attuned to every cough, every slight soreness, any difference in our physicality. So I think, this year we're all so attuned, almost to an unhealthy degree, to what's happening in our bodies. Sukkot has always, for me, been a time of almost adventurous exploration. It's such a unique Jewish holiday. It's so physical and it's outdoors. And it just seemed to me that, if there was a way to think of a project that could push me beyond fear and into a place of grace and gratitude and reverence in my body for this Sukkot, that would be the gift I would hope for. So that's what we tried to reach towards.
And also just along those lines, I want to throw in, and also I want to remind everyone who is watching this conversation that you can type in questions in our chat function. I'm just thinking about how the concept of Ushpizin, which you reference in your piece, which is the tradition of inviting guests into a sukkah, which, by the way, has always been interpreted abstractly. We always imagine that the avot and perhaps imahot, the matriarchs and patriarchs, could be invited into our sukkahs in a sort of, again, mystical, strange way. We always think of Ushpizin as an abstraction, but I'm wondering also about, like, when we think of the sukkah as the body, and given the intense experience we're all having with our bodies this year, if it's an invitation toward empathy as well.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to speak from my Jewish experience, and forgive me for this response, Rabbi Matt, but I think that abstraction is a severe cop-out. Here we have these beautiful physical temporary spaces that we're building, and I think Ushpizin in its most sacred form is actually truly physical and tangible, inviting the stranger into your, not only your physical space, but into your Jewishness, into your practice. And I'll speak from my own Jewish experience growing up. That did not happen. I think it is an underutilized theme of the holiday, and frankly, an underutilized theme in Jewish life. Opening our doors and making Jewish practice something that's shared and communal for people who are strangers to us and we're strangers to them. I think that's sacred, amazing work, and that's a central component of everything we do. But this year, in some ways, it's even more profound because we are all isolated physically. So how do you, create more empathy, more opening without being able to touch each other or really meet up in the ways that we have traditionally, right? That's the challenge.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the theme of Ushpizin, Danielle approaching me to do this Sukkot project was a form of welcoming a stranger to Jewish ritual, myself. And I think in all the work that we've done, we have sort of expanded Sukkot to other artists, to non-Jews in New York City, to movement artists this year, to really sort of kind of uncover what this holiday is really about. And I think one of the things that has always come up is that, these rituals, something that we so often just do without thinking about its origin or its purpose. And sort of like leading it to the movement artists who were in this piece, are really kind of like giving them that space to just explore it as they would, was really interesting for us. And also, an experiment. Like, I think Danielle and I really didn't know what was going to come of it, but we were very pleased.
And as you saw, we were so thrilled with what happened. I actually want to turn it over to our movement artists if I can, because I'd love to hear, if you don't mind, Hadar and Nehemoyia, I'd love to hear a little bit about some context you might be willing to provide for the pieces that everyone just saw, a little bit about your process, anything you're willing to share would be great.
You want to start?
You have to unmute. Okay.
Nehemoyia.
Yeah, Nehemoyia, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, first off, thank you just for this invite into the process, into the project, and thank you for Congregation Elohim and the Jewish Museum for hosting this. But yeah, I was very excited about this project and the prompt, and I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I knew going in that I wanted to be literal. I was given the body part, the mouth, and I knew that I wanted to go in literal, thinking about, well, how do you make the mouth dance, or what are the movements of the mouth? And I knew that I wanted to be literally in the wilderness, or as close to that as possible. So I did film this in my family's kind of like a wooded area of our yard. And I thought a lot about the mouth, about how, because of the pandemic, it's one part of the body that's been both covered and confined, but also essential, and in that way liberated. outdoor, our mouths are covered, and it creates this weird thing where you can't really tell how someone is feeling or how they're responding to you, or when they're being friendly and acknowledging your presence. And so these very simple but meaningful interactions get lost behind a mask. And then suddenly you're indoors, and the new normal is this, where you're standing in front or staring at a screen with a bunch of faces and mouths, and it becomes the only kind of the focal point of the body. Right. So that was something that I was thinking about going in. And one day in the park, actually, I found myself, I was sitting on a bench, and there was like all these people passing by, and I had my mask on, and I found myself just pulling it down to like smile at people and then putting it back up. Which is probably pretty creepy, but I just felt like I needed to, I just wanted to people, I needed them to know that I was like smiling at them and acknowledging the fact that they were walking past me. But yeah, anyway, I knew that I wanted to be literal with this. And so I really just started with bringing in text and reading the text, and kind of oscillating between slowly reading it to speed reading it to trying to memorize certain chunks, and riff on different words that I could remember from, I started off with the Psalms of Ascent. So Psalm 120 to 134. And so I just kind of turned my timer on and went through a process of doing a durational reading of that text, and really just paying attention to the experience of the mouth. My practice always involves generating movement through durational structured improvs. And that involves bringing different elements into this space, whether that's text, time is an element, of course, music is sometimes an element, or just the natural sounds of the environment. And so, yeah, I just played with this text and used my camera actually to kind of mirror the shaking movement that the rabbi was talking about. So, instead of actually moving my body, I stayed perfectly still and let the camera do some of that movement work and that dancing around me. But a lot of film was captured for this, and I ended up with this small part, but it was a process that took me a lot of different places. So I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Hadar?
Yeah. Thank you to the invitation and everybody who's here. I was telling everybody before we came on that I was really in a lot of grief and not dancing at all, hardly, when I got the email to do this project. And I was like, okay, it's 1 minute. I think I can pull 1 minute of dancing out of myself. So maybe you can hear it right now. The train is passing by my house, and it's been like one of the most moving experiences of sheltering in place, to be at home and witness the changes in the environment of my house, and the way that the subways just kept streaming through, even as it was like perfectly still. And I would like look outside my kitchen window and be like 1, 2, 3 people on an entire Q train heading into Manhattan. And yeah, it was so bizarre. And I would just like lie on my floor and feel like the vibration of the house as the train passes. I can feel it right now. And I was just so incredibly grateful for like the gift of my body and being able to notice, and also so very aware of the people who were still working and still putting their lives on the line and still not getting the protections that they needed, and being made to show up to care for the rest of us. So really, I just felt like these are the veins of the city that are passing by my house. And when I was invited to do the piece about the etrog, I was thinking about this, and my work has been very cerebral for the last several years. And in this time of not making work, I feel like my art practice has just been like listening to my intuition, listening to the environment, whether that's here or out in the street with people. And so I really wanted to approach this like first time making something in like 6 months from that place. listening to the synchronicity, listening to my desire, and I happened to be talking to a friend who had put up this memorial at the Jackie Gleason Depot in Sunset Park. And I really, I used to live in Sunset Park. I used to bike on that stretch a lot. And I love the wilderness of that place. Like, to me, this no place that is that stretch, it's like, you know, this industrial zone next to Greenwood Cemetery. And I actually knew that I didn't want to be in a park for some reason. Like, I really wanted like my body to be the quote, like, natural thing in the environment. I've been doing a lot of Qigong exercises, just like breathing into my organs and like breathing joy into my heart, exhaling hastiness. Thank you, Montakchia, and my teachers for that teaching. Really, the way that the emotions are connected to our organs and breathing into them has been a really grounding, healing practice for me. So I knew that I wanted to bring that, and I didn't know how I would connect that to the MTA. And then looking at the map of that place, and it looked like an etrog, and I was just like, that's bizarre. And then I show up there, and there's a graffiti heart with an eye. I was just like, I'm like taking these little synchronicities, like these little things that pop up in my day as signs of care, as like little messenger angels. And I really, you know, I got to watch the video of everybody last night, and it was like some of my first time watching dance on video, and was so moved by everybody's contributions. I really felt in like my body enlivened, and was really moved by the invitation for my body to be my sukkah. And I went out again this morning to the spot where I filmed, and tried to really enact this intention of it being an offering, and made sure to direct my dancing, my heart to the drivers that were passing by. And what else did I want to say? I don't know, maybe I'll stop there.
Thank you. Obviously, you both made incredible work. I know we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A, but I just want to quickly say that Verónica and Londs, who are not here tonight, their bios are on my website. So if anybody wants to learn more about them, it's DanielleDurchslag.com. And also, we wanted to speak just a tiny bit about the context for their pieces as well, because they were kind enough to give us a little bit of context. So do you want to do that for Londs quickly?
Yeah, so Londs Reuter's piece was really inspired by her gazing up from her fire escape, gives that view up towards the sky. She was interested in questions of effort, and, you know, having this sort of view that's of an intentionally obscured body and only revealing certain sections. And I thought it was a really compelling way to explore, represent the eyes in this project.
Totally. And Verónica, who did that beautiful piece about the spine, she wrote to us that she was really thinking about sort of her body as a site of immigration, and how to, as an immigrant, how to find home. What does home mean in the body when you're not in your home country? She also talked about how the movement of the spine that she's doing is actually a balancing movement for pH. Like, it's a balancing, kind of bring your body into balance motion that she's doing over that ritual she's created. The yellow she's wearing references the etrog, and the kind of ashes on her back are her idea of the sort of impermanent lulav, the lulav that's sort of been scattered, that's now become part of the body. That was some of the context that she gave us for her beautiful piece. So we wanted to offer that too. And thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I can point out a few questions from the Q&A that we've got going on. And I think you both choreographers did such a great job of speaking specifically to their pieces, because a lot of people ask technical questions, but you already answered some of them. So these are two things that got touched on, which maybe we could revisit in more depth. But one is dance on video is so different from live dance. How did you think about making that translation, and what that meant for the piece that you submitted? So we could start with that, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like this question. Thank you. One of the things that is different for me about kind of dance on film versus maybe going into the studio with a group of people and there's a process. And is that on the other end, like during the editing process, you get to see it as the witness. So when you are a performer, when you're creating it, you often don't experience it as the witness until it's completely over, and that could be a year from when you started. And so there was something that was satisfying about being the witness throughout the process of filming something and then looking at it, and filming something else and then looking at it, but also that it's the process of understanding like how what you did is transformed into meaning for some, might be transformed into meaning for somebody else. So for the section that I presented, I don't really remember what I was saying per se in that particular segment. I don't remember what part of the text I was reading, but I could make out with my lips the word Jacob. I could make out the word righteousness. And even though maybe you all didn't know those words were being said, I think that there was probably a process of you maybe looking for what was being said, or maybe creating your own meaning of what might have been said. And so being a part of that process of kind of switching between performer and witness is an interesting and satisfying process in creating dance on film. And I think that's a huge part of ritual in general, just that the people who are performing and creating the ritual and the people who are witnessing the ritual often have to not swap roles, but it's a shared experience in that. So.
That's beautiful. For me, there's an element of control that I have as a choreographer when I'm making something for video that I don't have when you're making something live. I mean, I do think that there is a choreographic skill that people have of really directing people's gaze exactly where they want you to look in a live performance. But there's something about I get to choose what you are looking at every moment of 60 seconds was really wild for me, and I got a lot of pleasure out of having that amount of control. It was kind of a release. And yeah, it was beautiful to get to think about, you know, these moments that happen in improvisation, getting to share them in a live performance. You had let go of the results. You do an improvisation, you let go, and what happens in that moment between you and the audience is the gift that happens. And I still can't control people's interpretations, like what they take away, what they connected to or didn't connect to. But being able to like choose the moments that I felt captured the essence that I was trying to communicate was, you know, there's pleasure and there's a gift in that.
Yeah. And somehow related to that, someone asked, are there any practices for getting into your body that you can recommend as a place to start, or a practice that resources you?
Well, it's funny that right before tonight's event, we were nervous, of course, and we started doing some stretches together, mirroring each other, just as a way to kind of get into our bodies and out of our heads. We're not professional movement artists, so I'm sure they have better suggestions than we do. But I think in a layman's terms, just moving your body in a focused, ritualized way is a good start. Would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, you know, that I've been doing a lot of Tai Chi during the pandemic, which was in the film. And I think that one thing that is, you know, silver lining to this moment is that it sort of has taken me out of my normal routine. And I think it's an opportunity for everyone to, you know, really reevaluate what they need and what they want.
But also I just want to say, you don't have to move to get into your body. You know, if movement is challenging or painful or whatever, just really focusing on one of these 4 body parts in the coming week and asking yourself, what is my spine experiencing right now? Focus in on it. What does it feel? What does it want? What is it doing? I think even that, moving away from just the body as a site of potential illness to the body as a place of potential energy and focus is actually a really helpful kind of step in this time.
Let's add shaking, like the lulav. Yes. Shake your lulav.
Shake it out.
Shake any part of your lulav. Shake it in any direction.
Listen, if you can't have a lulav this week, because a lot of us won't have lulav, shake something. It feels great.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Shaking is actually the best way for me to get into my body, however you see fit. Get as wild or as small as you need to, but it's a great way to drop the energy and get grounded.
I just want to say something. We were in a very Orthodox area of New York doing some filming, and we got to chat with some folks there, and we kind of made a friend that day, Chaim. And Chaim, we interviewed Chaim on camera. It didn't end up being in the piece, but we said to him, "What do you love about Sukkot?" And he didn't know anything about this project, and he said, "The dancing." And we said, "Wait, what?" Are you serious? Like, of course, the first night of Sukkot, my friends and I are dancing until 4, 5, 6 in the morning on the street. Now, if you're in that community, that's their observance. In my observance of Sukkot, coming from a kind of conservative movement family, we didn't dance, right? But it's really interesting that for the very observant community in New York, apparently dancing is actually a central part of this holiday, right? So that movement, that freedom, that shaking, it really is in the mix.
Yeah, actually, now I was going to ask one, but someone said something in another question about the thing that they've been drawn to about Sukkot is remembering how they were decorating the sukkah, which I think is my experience of Sukkot, and that is a part of celebrating the holiday. So the emphasis on decorating something, even though it's temporary, that you adorn it. I'm curious if you see connections between that practice of adornment and your interpretation of sukkah and the body. And also they asked about wearing masks, and maybe that's in relevance to the project in this year. So,
I mean, I'll speak for myself. It's been a very low adornment set of months for me. I think a lot of us are in a low adornment area for obvious reasons. It's a sweatpants kind of time, the pandemic. But I have to say, one of the things I love about Sukkot, and there's so many things, is this idea of, with the etrog, this is said, and please, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, it's mitzvah, it's good deed in part, is its beauty. This is a holiday about beauty. It's about creating something beautiful, recognizing beauty, admiring beauty, and I love that as a prayer practice, right? So even if you're not gonna get out of your sweatpants in the coming week, which is fine, I'm pro sweatpants, finding beauty, whether it's through your window or a moment in your home or something in your closet you're just focusing on for a couple seconds. I think finding beauty, especially within the confines of this time, and especially during Sukkot, in Jewish terminology, is a mitzvah. It's a good deed. And this holiday is an opportunity to embrace that.
And I'll just add, one thing that I think has been a driving force with this project, Sukkah In Place and Assembly Required, is that Sukkot is really about creating something, building something. And we realized early on that there were a lot of parallels to making a sukkah and organizing an exhibition, and that you create a space, you put things up on the walls, you invite—
lots of time and effort.
Yeah. You invite your community in to experience it. And then, before too long, it all comes down.
It's gone.
So I think, there's always been that component of like realizing that like it is kind of this ritualized art project. I was reminded of that and texted Danielle last night. I was at Home Depot and in Bed-Stuy, which is near a Hasidic neighborhood, and there were lots of people getting their supplies ready to build their sukkah, and you really did like feel the excitement of this, and like kids really getting excited about doing this art project.
Yeah, I live in Bed-Stuy, and I've seen not in Bed-Stuy proper, but a little bit further north. I've seen some sukkahs come up. I've seen really large ones as well, and folks out there building them. So that was exciting to see that as we were working on this.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the place to insert that I said to Danielle and Ryan as we were talking about this project, that I feel like all the outdoor dining in New York that has been happening in the last few months is like preparation. It's like sukkahs everywhere. So that's how I see those structures.
I tell you, over the years that Ryan and I have been making these projects, this is our third one, you do start to see sukkahs everywhere. Once your eyes are open to the sukkah as an idea and a structure, you will find them naturally occurring quite a lot.
Yes. Okay, so maybe I'll find one or two more questions to wrap us up. This one, someone said, when you say movement, you've been referring to body movement, not social movement, though I think about these things as connected, and I'm interested in the way that you would interpret that.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
This is a time of a lot less physical movement for all of us, and for at least in this part of Brooklyn that we happen to be in, it's absolutely a time of increased social movement participation, and I don't think those two things are a coincidence. That one is lessened and the other is enhanced, right? Because there's something about being still and stuck that I think has brought up more political action and movement and desire for change in a really robust, tangible way in this moment. That's been inspiring, and I hope it leads to some big changes. So, I think of them connected in that way. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you say, I think, and as I sort of referenced before, this being a period when, we can reevaluate and shift and shake things up, so to speak, and that there is something about, I think, sort of being more sort of simple and minimal in how you live your daily life, and that being an opportunity for, to have something brew and to really give yourself time to think and examine. So yeah, I think that's relevant.
Yeah, and I have to say, in a small, intimate way, if you really practice Ushpizin this week, welcoming the stranger, really, that is a social movement. Really welcoming someone into your life or into your practice or into conversation somehow where you normally wouldn't connect, in a humble, gracious, arms open way, that is social movement to me.
I would also add, and I've thought this throughout this evening, that there is an ideological impulse too in universalizing this ritual, that there is a movement. It's not an organized social movement, but there is a process of moving our tradition into the universal with what you're doing. And this also responds to another question that was in the Q&A about what you've done in this work, which is to take something that's uniquely Jewish and make it human. And so I think another dimension of the movement, I know it's all just play on words versus on top of play on words, we'll just keep punning tonight, but I think that another part of it is that you're moving this into the universal.
It's really interesting you say that, Matt, because when I was a kid, there's a ceremony at the end of Sukkot where traditionally men get together and do this like really crazy kind of shaking ritual around the synagogue. They sort of circle around the synagogue and they're all shaking their lulavs. And I would go sometimes and watch as a kid when my dad did it. And I remember more toward the ages of like 11 and 12, seeing all these men in business suits. They were mostly doctors and lawyers and accountants shaking these lulavs around the synagogue. I thought, if one of my non-Jewish friends walks in right now, they're literally going to think we're insane, right? Because it was so outlandishly outside the bounds of what is publicly sort of shared in Jewish life. And that memory is really stuck with me. And I think a lot of why I love doing this work and believe in doing this work is because that is too preciously bizarre to be private, right? The things that in Jewish life are weird and odd and specific, I want those doors to open because I also would love to have entry to those things in other faiths, right? The more we share that stuff, the better I believe we are. That's my ideology.
I could share that. I feel like I was inspired by the social movements of like naming the lost is a project that my friend Jenny Romaine was participating in, and she made a memorial at the depot where I went to film. And I thought that I I didn't know if I would want that to be legible to the viewer. And this is to answer another question. Like, even though I enjoyed controlling facets of the video, I don't feel like I need to control the viewer's experience of it or the meaning making that they make. It's exciting to me that there is that gap and that there is meaning creating and in the meeting of those two things. It felt very Jewish to me that I was inspired by this movement, that I was inspired by a tradition of radical Jews that thinks about ourselves as in solidarity with the movements of workers around the world. In my projects for the last 5 years, I've been very forward with my Jewish identity, and I think something about doing this in the context of a Jewish project, I felt like I could let that go a little bit. It was a little bit of a relief. It's been part of my project to be very forward-facing about my Jewishness and my heritage as an anti-assimilationist move, and it was nice not to have to do that in this context. But I feel like I was speaking. Literally, I was speaking with my Jewish movement friends, both social movements and people who move in their bodies. And that was an integral part of my process and how I arrived to film where I did.
If I could chime in quickly here, I wanted to say that it's interesting in the question about social movement, because even though I'm not Jewish, because I grew up Christian, specifically African Methodist Episcopal, the Exodus story is actually really, really important in our tradition. And so even though I didn't grow up celebrating Sukkot or necessarily relating the text to this holiday in that specific way, the story of the Exodus is actually a story that grounds Christians, specifically Black Christians, in social movements. This idea that the Exodus is liberation theology, essentially, right? And so from the tradition that I come from, even though it's not Jewish, this text is extremely important and is actually not just historical, but is looked at time as speaking to the now and being a source of liberation, and something that is always contemporary for us too.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end, and you guys managed to answer those two questions in one really wonderful thought out response collectively. So I want to thank everyone for being who was listening tonight and watching. The video piece that Danielle and Ryan have made is going to be up on the Jewish Museum's YouTube channel tomorrow, so you can watch it or tell your friends to watch it if you weren't here tonight. And thank you all so much for participating in this conversation.
And Jenna, can we please just quickly thank you? Thank you, Matt. Thank you, the Jewish Museum, thank you, Congregation Beth Elohim. We are so grateful for this opportunity and to get to share this work this way. So thank you all, and Chag Sameach.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Bye.